Good evening. I'm Gracelyn Guyol, and welcome to Inspiring Local Nonprofits. This week I'm interviewing Chris Freeman, who is president of Cleanup Sound in Harbors. Welcome, Chris.
Well, thank you very much. It's nice to be here.
In addition to running CUSH, which is Cleanup Sound in Harbors, the acronym for it, and a 501c3 nonprofit, Chris Freeman is also development director at Mystic Seaport. Tell viewers a little bit about your background.
Well, sure. I grew up here in the town of Stonington, went away to school, lived away for a number of years after, and then decided this was too nice a part of the world not to try to come back and raise a family. And I took a job at the Seaport, really was intended as a placeholder, just as a stake in the ground to get us back here and to get started. But that's been 18 years now in at the museum, and I just love the organization, and it's proven to be a great career for me. So fantastic.
And it has grown a great deal since you started there. It's become a fabulous organization, so you're in a good spot.
We sure are, yeah. And so founded in 1929, the museum's been growing and growing for a long time. And as much as I'd like to hope I've contributed to some of the recent success, it really is a very strong organization with good leadership throughout, and the benefits, I think, are evident.
Well, we're here to have you talk about your other part-time nonprofit job,
Sure, yeah.
CUSH,
Yeah.
Cleanup Sound in Harbors. For those people who have not heard about it, please say a little bit about when CUSH was founded and its primary mission.
Sure. So CUSH was founded in 2007 by some interested citizens in really, I guess, the borough of Stonington, who were concerned about or had an interest in the water quality and water health in Stonington Harbor proper. Since then, the original mandate was about healthy water. Since then, our scope and interest have increased just a little bit further afield to really incorporate an interest in water quality health throughout Fisher's Island Sound and now Long Island Sound. CUSH principally is involved in about 4 different activities. We do some water quality sampling and monitoring, which is the science side, and then we do a lot of public outreach, communication, education, if you will, around topics of sound-friendly boating, trying to help those who are using the water resource for recreation to understand how to minimize impacts and to be more sound-friendly or environmentally benign in that activity.
And how do you reach the boaters?
Yeah, so we were very fortunate. We got some grant funding from Boat US Foundation to produce a nice little flyer, which we have distributed to marinas all throughout the Mystic River estuary, Stonington Harbor sites, and even over into Little Narragansett Bay a little bit. And it really is a spring activity for our members and volunteers to circle back around to the marinas, make sure that that information is available to boat owners at marinas. We also do a lot to collaborate with the Town of Stonington Harbor Management Commission, who routinely will put information in their newsletter for us and also help us to disseminate our message to people who are using the marine resource as a recreational resource. Yeah. And then we also do promote sound-friendly yard maintenance, garden maintenance. We had been calling it organic practices. Now we're calling it natural practices, which we think is a sort of an easier term for people to get their heads and hearts and minds around. We're trying to lead people to understand the impact of using various fertilizers, amendments, pesticides, herbicides on their lawn, and try to get them to think differently about how they are treating their own little microenvironment, as it were.
And we're going to talk more about that a little bit later. I'd like to come back to the water testing part of it.
Sure.
Because you have, I think you had like 18 water testers, and they go out weekly in the summertime. And so talk about that process of testing and getting the data, and then what happened with the data. You came out with this sort of milestone report recently.
Yeah, so CUSH is a little bit unique in that it truly is an all-volunteer organization. We don't have paid staff. We've got a great cadre of willing and able volunteers, and we work in collaboration with URI Watershed Watch. And so our volunteers are all trained by them, so they are up to the appropriate standards to collect the samples according to the right protocol. We then take those samples that are collected, send them to URI for the assay work, and then the results come back to us. And we did just publish in 2013 a report on the first 4 years of our efforts, and then just last year published our 2014 water quality reports, and then this spring we'll be publishing our results from 2015. And those results have gotten us, the report and the results themselves have gotten us a lot of attention, and really I think elevated our stature within both the scientific community and the citizen community in terms of the quality of the work we're doing and the impact and meaning of that work.
And talk a little bit about why it's so important to have several years of data and have it be scientific, solid science.
Sure. It's funny, one of the most common things that's asked of me is, when are you going to stop measuring and start doing something? And I think it's important that people understand the measuring is doing something.
The big doing.
Right, and what we're trying to do, of course, is establish some baselines against which we can measure either improvements to the estuaries and the embayments locally or degradation to those estuaries and embayments. And as with all science, it's a lot of data, and it can be a little bit difficult at times to discern trend lines. But the longer you do this, more continuously, the more obvious or clear some of those trends become. And so it's an important activity.
It's helped you identify areas, real problem areas, and areas that are relatively clean. So you can, because all of this costs money. The water testing you have to pay for. I mean, you have to pay for it.
It's our single largest expense in terms of our cash outlay every year.
Collecting the data is a big expense, and that's why it's not been done before, not at the level that CUSH has been doing for so many years in this particular geographic area.
Right, and so there are lots of different enterprises, entities, non-government and government agencies who do some water quality testing and monitoring. In particular, of course, the state is always testing for pathogens to assess human health conditions for swimming and for aquaculture. We're testing a little bit more on the nutrient side, because what we're interested in is healthy water for the organisms that actually live in the water, in the estuary, in the embayment. So we're testing for dissolved oxygen, dissolved nitrogen, that sort of thing. I think in the area, we're one of the most consistent and most long-running studies, and so it's a good data for us.
Well, and the other thing, when I understood that there used to be organizations that did studies, but this was before computers and where you could collaborate so easily with other organizations, and so all of the data was on 3x5 cards in somebody's closet. It was never online and available to others, which the CUSH data is all available online to other researchers and to other organizations.
That's correct, yeah. So again, data is only as good as our ability to share and to learn from it. And you're absolutely right. For a long time, the data would reside sort of privately held or captive with the agency or organization that had collected it. We're making tremendous advancements in digitizing that information and sharing it among a lot of different organizations. And I think also importantly, citizen science, which is what we're considered, is getting, I think, a lot more respect now by the professional science community. And there's an understanding that all it really is doing is helping to expand data sets so that the interpretation and extrapolation can become that much more accurate.
And precise. And also, I think the other thing that CUSH has done very well is collaborated with other water organizations in the area so that you're not duplicating the efforts. And so that has been another, the help has been the communications that we all enjoy now so readily. Yeah,
it's important to share and to work with others, and there's a big effort afoot sort of along all of Long Island Sound to do just that.
And so what does the CUSH data show so far, in a nutshell?
Yeah, well, so essentially we are testing embayments and estuaries on the Mystic River, Stonington Harbor, and Little Narragansett Bay. We tested about 10 different locations, and with the exception of Stonington Harbor and a control site off of Sandy Point, which are both very good quality, all of our other sample sites show impaired water. And the challenge is really twofold. There still are too many nutrients getting into the water, and then there's too little flow. And so I think what we've demonstrated over time is that those really are the two most important factors in degraded water quality, are nutrient overload and lack of flow.
Okay, so where does that overload come from?
Yeah, so good question. We're fortunate in one regard that there are not a lot of single point sources, or at least those that did exist have been addressed, meaning there aren't a lot of just big spigots or taps that are putting
factories.
a lot of bad stuff into the water. So we've overcome those challenges. But what that leaves and remains for us is sort of the bigger hurdle, which is the non-point source. So it's all of the nutrients that are getting into the groundwater from sources perhaps way upstream or way inland. And
So runoff.
Well, runoff is nutrients and material that's on the surface that comes off of the surface during big storms. Groundwater is nutrients that have percolated down into the water table and are migrating underground, ultimately down into the ocean.
Okay.
And so that's, I think, really where CUSH's most important role comes in, is trying to help everybody to understand how everything we're doing in terms of treating our lawns, managing our septics, cleaning up after our pets, making sure our cars aren't leaking oil and things on the driveway, all of those things, ultimately what goes on the ground ends up in the sound, either as runoff during rainstorms or seeping into the groundwater and moving through the water table into the ocean. So our ability to communicate that and to help people think a little bit more deliberately about what they're doing and how it might impact water quality.
And so really one of your major efforts is to educate locals about what they can do to make a difference, to keep gradually over time improving the water that we all enjoy and value so much.
Well, that's our hope, right? We firmly believe that part of what makes this part of Connecticut so attractive is lifestyle, and that healthy water is really vital to that quality of life, whether we use it for swimming or fishing or recreation or beachcombing or meditation or whatever it is. That healthy water really is a dynamic and robust component of what makes our quality of life so precious here. And so I think helping everybody to understand that resource is imperiled, and that it's largely imperiled because of our actions and activities, is really what we aim to do. But do it in a way that is encouraging people to think about their own enlightened self-interest and to act accordingly.
Well, and you also have done a lot of collaborations with other partners around water quality. You've talked about Ground to Sound. So how about organic lawn care workshops? You've done wonderful things there.
Yeah, one of our board members has taken this on as a charge, and again has a sort of a subcommittee or cadre of very active volunteers who are advocates in the community for natural turf management practices. We've got a great partner and collaborator in Chip Osborne, who's a nationally recognized expert in this field, and we've had him come now, I think, 3 or 4 times to give courses and teach curriculum and give information about how to manage our yards and gardens naturally. I think one of our big successes was last year he came and we were able to fund, CUSH was able to fund the participation of municipal employees, and we had 14 employees from 4 different municipalities locally attend the seminar to improve their knowledge and understanding about natural practices. And really one of the big outcomes of that was the Stonington First Selectmen and Board of Education voted to allow the school superintendent to do a demonstration project on the baseball field at the Stonington High School using all natural practices. Chip was retained as the advisor and put together the RFP and established the protocols, and so that project is underway, and predicated on success there, which right now looks promising. There's a commitment to do that on all of the fields, and we hope then move over to some of the municipally managed towns, parks, and public spaces.
And so why this is so important is not just for the sound, but also for the health of the kids that are playing on their fields, so that they're not getting more exposure to pesticides, herbicides, and the toxins that are frequently used to have the perfect green grass, which you can also have if you know how to do it organically and do it consistently. So that's wonderful news about the high school field. That's great.
Yeah.
Do you have any plans to plant shellfish?
This is a good question. I can't say that CUSH as an organization has plans to plant shellfish, but we do try to encourage the work of the Noank Aquaculture Cooperative over in Noank, and we do try to encourage communities who have an interest in the oyster fishery in particular, but shellfishing generally, to pursue that interest, because the shellfish, especially the oysters, are really good filter feeders, and they do a lot to help clean the water column in these embayments. And so, yeah, I think, strongly endorse aquaculture, especially the oyster fishery, but I don't think we're going to be setting our own spat out there anytime soon.
Well, when I was involved with CUSH, I went on an oyster planting a collaboration with some of the water organizations in Rhode Island, and they were planting.
Yes.
So some of us from CUSH went over and assisted, because you always need a lot of people.
Right.
And it was a lot of fun, but I had prior to that read the book Oyster, which talks about New York, all the harbors around New York City, and how at one time in history they were so filled with oysters that they filtered the whole area every 24 hours.
Right.
The water was so pristine. So we can hope for that in the future.
Sure. Well, and I think that future may not be as distant as you think. I mean, there's a lot of progress with oyster aquaculture in particular in our area, and it continues to grow. There continues to be interest, and I'm told now that people are finding, quote, wild sets of oysters that have spawned naturally and sort of gotten outside of the leaseholds and are taking hold. So that's all very encouraging.
The water quality is good enough for them to survive and then repopulate, and it is a great commercial product. So the demand is there as well. So that's good news.
Yeah.
What can we do to get rid of the macroalgae that is plaguing little Narragansett Bay?
So that's a good question, and it's a little bit of a tricky answer.
Okay.
So yeah, some people may recall, I guess it was last summer or the summer before, a bunch washed ashore on the eastern side of Stonington Point and began to decompose and was just a real nuisance for the residents down there.
The smell was awful.
Yeah, you could testify, yeah. Well, so Little Narragansett Bay has become largely overrun by this macroalgae Cladophora. And the principal reason, again, is that there's such a high nutrient load there that it's a very good breeding ground for this particular algae. The problem is twofold. The algae consumes a lot of the oxygen out of the water during the nighttime, which is very bad for other living organisms that are in that
low oxygen
embayment.
water.
And then as it dies, it falls to the bottom and decomposes, putting a sort of this barrier mat of just nasty
Is that
algae
the
and
black
mud.
mayonnaise that
underneath the top
the water
layer is
testers describe?
Precisely. And so it further presents a barrier to eelgrass and shellfish and other crustaceans from inhabiting that environment. The solution ultimately is to take as much of the nitrogen out of the water as we can, and that's really a long-term goal because, again, a lot of it is just coming from stormwater runoff and from groundwater.
Well, and the septic systems are treating the sewage, and so it is safer, but it's still discharging nitrogen into the water.
So the public utility water plants have made tremendous improvements. There's clearly always room for more improvement, and the town, we're trying to encourage and work with the town to spend more focus or put more focus to making improvements where they can. But then the other piece is private homeowners, as you say, the septics and the cesspools, helping people to understand that proper maintenance and proper operation
to be cleaned out and pumped out,
really critical.
Yeah, especially if they're along the harbor.
Surely.
And updated if they're really old ones along the harbor.
Yeah.
So that's because that's been the biggest challenge in the areas where that algae has taken over. Is what do you do about it once it's there? How do you get rid of it?
It sort of becomes a self-propagating cycle, if you will.
Expanding grunge.
Well, the good news is, though, that Save the Bay has opened a new office over in Westerly, and they're doing a lot of work along the Pawcatuck River to try to address nitrogen inputs into the river. They've also been doing a lot of studies about the algae, and another friend of CUSH and partner and collaborator, Jamie Vaudry over at University of Connecticut has been doing a lot of study and survey, and so we're starting to get a better picture of exactly what's happening there and how the circulation in Little Narragansett Bay is functioning and what the scope of the problem is. And CUSH has just recently gotten involved with another professor up at UConn who's working with the Eastern Connecticut Conservation District to do some surveying further inland, further up the watershed there,
okay.
So that we'll get a better handle on precisely where some of this some of this nitrogen might be coming from beyond what we've already identified.
Okay, because farms and some of those farther up in the watershed can be farms or agricultural input too. So
yeah, correct.
But we don't have huge agri-farms, big factory farms or anything like that. That's all individuals. Okay, so the town of Stonington has adopted a plan of conservation and development for the town, and how are you working with local agencies to support implementation and adoption of this plan?
Yeah, so this is really an exciting opportunity, and I think we're fortunate that our town government was forward-thinking enough to see the importance of a good plan of conservation and development. Members of the CUSH board and other volunteers participated in the process of trying to help the town create the plan, and so many of our recommendations were carried forward as part of what has now been adopted as that plan. We're very grateful that at present the first selectman of Stonington clearly has an interest in seeing the plan implemented, is working with the town planner Jason Vincent as well. And so CUSH's role really is to try, where we're able, is to participate in the process and try to encourage and aid and abet, because I think that all of the different players in the municipal government are aligned behind it. Now it's just a function of allowing it to unfold. We're talking about doing some, both participating in the implementation planning at the town level, but also
to the fertilizing.
Oh yeah, that's the baseball field getting ready for the first round.
And that's the organic?
Yeah.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah.
Great.
So anyways, doing what we can to help people understand as citizens their role in working with municipal government and agencies to adopt the recommendations in the plan.
And to support those agencies. I know
Correct.
When the town was trying to get a bond passed to upgrade all three of the sewage treatment plants in Stonington, CUSH was helping them reach out to the community and do a presentation of that and to try and support that effort because it was so important to water quality.
Yeah, correct. It's not ever to be an adversarial relationship. This is about collaboration, cooperation. Again, I think healthy water is vital to our quality of life, and everybody has a vested interest in seeing it happen.
Yes. There seem to be a lot of organizations working to improve water quality in Long Island Sound. We've talked about sharing the data, but just elaborate a little bit more on how you do that.
Sure. So there are lots of other citizen science groups like CUSH working in embayments both on Long Island and the coast of Connecticut. There are lots of other nonprofit agencies like Save the Sound, Save the Bay, that are doing their own work in monitoring. And then there are the state and federal agencies like Connecticut Deep and the New York State Department of Environmental Protection, who also are doing monitoring. The data often is shared, but the data often is dissimilar or inconsistent. And so there's a real movement now, led largely by Save the Sound here in Connecticut and New York, but also supported by a new entity called the Long Island Sound Funders Collaborative, which is a group of not nonprofits, of private foundations that are committing resources to support this work.
Okay.
And the vision is to create a set of standards that we can all adhere to, sort of defining a minimum
So
set
the
of
data is
standards that can be uniform across all sites, from which we can then create a real good tool for the publics, which they're calling a report card, which would be uniform across all the different embayments, all the different bodies of water, and provide some standards against which we can sort of see, make some qualitative judgments about which areas are most degraded or least degraded, and then what lessons can we learn.
Haven't they done that in certain areas in Massachusetts and some other states where they have like 47 different communities that are all doing testing and they have this big report card that they issue. I've seen it. Somebody gave me one once.
Yeah, so it may be the case in Massachusetts. I'm not personally aware, but clearly down in the Chesapeake Bay, that's been a project and a program
Perhaps
that they've been working
and
on.
I'm not remembering it correctly.
And so we've got some folks from University of Maryland who are working with all of us to help get to some common standards and help us think differently about how we might create this report card.
Great. Well, that's great. We've got about 5 more minutes, so let's go back and just talk a little nuts and bolts about CUSH.
Sure.
How large of an organization is it?
Yeah. Well, so first and foremost, I've, in addition to working at Mystic Seaport, which is a pretty good-sized nonprofit in the community, I've done a lot of board service with other nonprofits in the community. And CUSH is unique in my experience in that we are all volunteers, and we don't have any paid professional staff. We have lots of professionals who are volunteers to support our work. And so that's, I think, unique to the enterprise. So all the philanthropic support we get goes directly to the water quality monitoring and the other activities we do. We have about 100, give or take, active either paid up members or philanthropic partners who support our work. We'd like to grow that. Most of them are residents here in the community who use the marine resource or the water resources in some form or fashion and understand its value and import. We're trying to grow that base and build more support so that we can extend the reach of what we're doing. We'd like to expand our monitoring to a little bit further afield, maybe move a little bit further west. There's some very strong interest from Save the Sound to try to get some good monitoring going on the Thames River and its various estuaries and embayments. We'd like to be a participant in that, perhaps. But we have a very small budget, you know, modest, maybe $10,000 to $20,000 a year. We raise all of that now exclusively from private individual support. And as I say, about 100 plus members, give or take, and probably 30 or 40 of those are very active volunteers either in the water quality sampling side or the natural turf management side. Okay.
And so I guess two things. One, you have some ambitious goals. So let's talk about these goals to get people excited about coming and supporting you, and then we'll talk about membership and what we can do to help support it.
So first and foremost, we want to continue the sampling and monitoring at the 10 sites that we currently are looking after. We'd like to try to add to those sites. We've got a great collaboration with the University of Connecticut sending some of their students into Wickety-Quaw Cove and Little Narragansett Bay to help us sort of augment our monitoring there. And we really think that we'd like to adopt that as kind of a demonstration project for the community, because it really is a good microcosm of all these issues where you've got stormwater runoff from streets and roads, where you've got increased development, where you've got some septic concerns, where you've got uplands contamination coming down, where you've got poor flow. And so working with UConn to further enhance that collaboration is another one of our big goals. Something we do a fair amount of that we'd like to do more of, we haven't really touched on yet, is coastal cleanup work, which is really very gratifying. It's literally picking up rubbish, debris, trash from along the shoreline. And that's a great way for a community to get involved. It's a lot of fun for families, for adults and kids to have a great day out and some nice weather along the coastline.
And there you have some kids at one of the functions.
Yeah, that's actually that's at the Groton Fall Festival, and we have a little demonstration table where we can show the impact of stormwater runoff. And so there are some, looks like some young kids with their parents watching one of our CUSH volunteers do a demonstration about how stormwater runoff works and migrates down to the ocean.
We only have 1 minute left, so what do you need most? Volunteers and contributions to keep this moving?
Well, so clearly in terms of the health of our little enterprise, yes, but I think what we need most is more people in the community to understand how their actions and their behaviors have an impact on water quality and how important water quality is to their quality of life.
And there's how to contact you up on the screen. So they can go to the website, get more information, contact you through the website. So thank you so much for all that you're doing for us in the community to keep this wonderful asset moving in the right direction instead of getting degraded. And thank you for coming today and sharing with us.
Well, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me, and thanks for putting on these shows and programs for the community.
You're welcome. I hope you'll join us next Wednesday at 7 o'clock for information about another inspiring local nonprofit. Thank you.